नाजरीन वेलकम बैक। नाजरीन, अफगानिस्तान में प्रेसिडेंट हामिद करज़ई के दूसरी मरतबा सदारती मुद्दत का हलफ जो उन्होंने जुमेरात को उठाया, वहाँ पर मौजूद एक मारूफ बैनुल-अक़वामी थिंक टैंक से वाबस्ता इंटरनेशनल क्राइसिस ग्रुप की सीनियर एनालिस्ट कैंडिस रोंदो हमारे साथ इस वक्त टेलीफोन लाइन पे मौजूद है। हम उनसे दरियाफ्त करेंगे कि अफगानिस्तान के अंदर वो अमेरिका और उसके इत्तेहादी ममालिक की जो ट्रूप्स हैं और हामिद करज़ई की हुकूमत है और अफगानिस्तान का जो एक सियासी मुस्तकबिल है, इस हवाले से हम उनसे उनकी राय और तज्जिया हासिल करेंगे। हमारे साथ टेलीफोन लाइन पे मौजूद हैं Candace Rondeaux. Welcome to the program, Candace Rondeaux. My first question is, you have been witnessing events in Afghanistan as a senior expert of International Crisis Group. And yesterday you must have witnessed the swearing-in ceremony of President Hamid Karzai. What is the level of optimism as Hamid Karzai has entered his second term as president in Afghanistan?
Well, Naeem, I think there can be no mistake about it that, the level of confidence in President Hamid Karzai's government is very low. There's nothing about this inauguration that did anything to, I think, deter the Afghan public from believing that essentially that they had been robbed of their vote. There is a great disaffection among Afghans here, and also, of course, among those internationals who are here working to ensure the electoral process. I think this has been a very demoralizing moment for many here in Afghanistan. And unfortunately, though the inauguration speech made many promises to turn things around by first confronting corruption, but also by rebuilding the security sector, I have seen no evidence as of yet in these last 8 years that President Karzai is really fully capable and committed to delivering on his promises.
Okay. Being in Afghanistan, that's the flashpoint in the whole world, and the whole world is discussing Afghanistan, what will happen, what President Obama is to decide regarding troops surge, and what NATO is going to do, what Taliban are doing. What do you think? What is the future of Afghanistan? Though it's a vague question, but we have limited time. So in your opinion, what is future of Afghanistan? The American allied troops, are they going to succeed, or they will just exit Afghanistan and will leave Afghanistan as they left after Soviet withdrawal in 1991, in 1989?
Sure. I mean, I think this is a very, very big question. It has so many facets to it. First of all, for the United States and its partners in NATO, they're wanting to understand exactly what it is they're dealing with now in Afghanistan. And in some ways, they've been quite naive about the number of problems that they face in terms of partnership with an Afghan government that's capable of reconstructing the country and also bringing public confidence together behind it. So, I mean, obviously this is one of the major considerations that the Obama administration, NATO allies, and others are now considering. After these elections, one can only surmise that there is a great deal of skepticism on the part of the international community about this particular regime and its ability to deliver. And I think that's the case for Afghans as well. What does that mean for the future of Afghanistan? It means that ultimately the international community will have to be a lot more honest in its assessments of its own flaws and how it handles, challenges in the Afghan governance structure. I think it will probably mean ultimately Afghanistan and its government and legislature in particular are going to have to move toward major constitutional reform. There's no way that you can expect the errors of these last 8 years to be corrected under the current constitutional framework. Otherwise, I think you'll find that you're basically reinventing the wheel over and over again without much result. And lastly, of course, on the question of troop surge. Again, this does depend on how the U.S. and its NATO partners really view, the leadership in Kabul, whether or not they're really considered a credible partner able to deliver or not. I think that it's been very clear, certainly, in the international media, it has been widely reported that domestically speaking, particularly in the United Kingdom and the United States, this war has become deeply unpopular. And, while I think the leaders in these countries must, of course, address the concerns of their domestic constituents, they have to look at the long term here in terms of national security for each of their governments and for the country as a whole. Because ultimately, abandoning Afghanistan will really have some very, very big knock-on effects in terms of global security. And no one should be mistaken about how rapidly this country will deteriorate if the United States and its international partners pull out.
Okay. There are some conspiracy theories going on on the international media, and especially in countries like Pakistan, that the real targets of Americans being in Afghanistan, those are not as declared by the White House or State Department or Pentagon. They are here as William Engdahl, in his recent article, he has mentioned that America is in Afghanistan to control the opium cultivation and the drug business, and they have Americans have put Hamid Karzai, who has himself been a drug warlord in Afghanistan, as president. So the real aim is just to get benefit of the geostrategic location of Afghanistan, and not as the declared aims to eliminate Al-Qaeda or to counterinsurgency or counterterrorism operation. Do you agree with this theory?
No, I don't agree with this theory at all. And in fact, I think it's quite spurious to suggest that the United States government and its partners in the international community are essentially in Afghanistan to facilitate the drug trade. This has not been the stated case. I think there's been wide-scale evidence to show that many of the operations that performed here by ISAF have targeted drug dealers and so forth. However, that said, I would also point out that, of course, enforcement has been incredibly weak. Targeting has been incredibly weak. And this does have something to do with the fact that there are some major contradictions for U.S. forces here in particular. When they want to do business in Afghanistan, they have to make deals with people who are sometimes quite unsavory. And this includes, to some degree, those who are involved in drug trafficking. Whether they like to admit it or not, I think it's now becoming clear that, for instance, the CIA has some pretty strong connections with folks like Ahmed Wali Karzai. And this really raises questions about, what does governance mean in places like Kandahar? However, I think it's also important to note that at the end of the day, shifting the blame on the U.S. and the international community for drug trafficking in Afghanistan really solves no problems. This is a transnational phenomenon that stretches all the way from India through Pakistan to Afghanistan and on to Iran and beyond. So I don't think it's, I think it's a bit disingenuous to play games about who the real actors are and who's really responsible. It's up to these governments to crack down and to enforce laws. If they don't want to do that, I don't think it's fair for them to then take money in aid from the United States or its partners and then simply blame them for the drug trafficking problem in the country.
Okay. When you know the Afghan history, they have never tolerated any foreign troops on their land, be it United Kingdom, Britain in the last century, or Soviet Union in 1980s, and now America. While the reports, and especially after General James Jones have accepted and he has confessed that the threat from Al-Qaeda is not that grave as it used to be, because their backs are broken now, and only 100 something operatives are in Afghanistan, and that too are not united and they don't have any place to operate. Now Taliban, on the other hand, they are known as common citizens of Afghanistan, just waging a war for freedom. Now in that, there is a difference in America,